Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
You can hear us? Okay, great.
Okay, we're online here to know.
All right. Awesome. Okay. So, and can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. And looks like we have a quorum, so do we want to go ahead and get started?
Can we see the baby or is she sleeping?
She's a little cranky right now, so maybe at the
Well,
end.
Okay, let's hope she gets
But you're
cranky.
grinning about it, so that's great news.
Let's hope she gets crankier so we get to see her.
Oh gosh.
This may help her sleep, you know.
Yeah.
All true facts.
Bedtime story.
Okay, well, let me go ahead and call the meeting to order. Looks like we have Margaret Clemens and Bernie Geritas in person, and then Julie Thomas online. Is Tron and Wright Randolph there as well? Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, looks like they're having a little bit of technical
Yeah,
difficulty.
looks like their camera went off.
Yes.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes.
We're back.
We
Okay.
just can't see you.
I know.
Oh, maybe we're gonna see you. There we go. There we
Yeah,
go.
sorry. I unplugged the thing when I was moving the owl.
Oh, that's okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay, so we have actually all four members in attendance then. Looks like Tron's in person. So do we want to go ahead and get started?
Please.
All
Please.
right.
Yeah, I do have the hard stop at 5:15, just
Yeah.
FYI.
Okay. Yes, we should be able to wrap it up 5:15 or 5:30. So on the agenda for today is we want to discuss a little bit of the conversation that we had with the highway department regarding subdivision bonds and renewal procedures. And then secondly, we want to just go back through for the CDO work session, just kind of look at the survey feedback map, zoning changes, some thoughts that we have from the listening sessions, and just a way to move forward, hopefully with the help of the ORC. Is there anything else on the agenda or missing from the agenda that you would like to add?
No.
Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first topic, which is the discussion of subdivision bonds and renewal procedures. So I just want to zoom out for a minute before we get to the actual ordinance amendment request. We had a letter read to us by Lisa Ridge from the Highway Department. This was in regards to the number of subdivision bonds that we have currently in process. So one of the challenges that we have for current subdivisions are that they get renewed at the same rate year after year, and the project is still incomplete. So I want to give a better presentation to the whole plan commission, but just kind of a 10,000 foot view, just some highlights. I just checked, we have 73 total subdivision bonds, whether that's cashier's checks or what we call letters of credit. Those were collected at the time of a subdivision being final platted or recorded, and certain improvements were not yet finished. So I'll give you an example. There could be a major subdivision that was not able to put in the sidewalks and street trees. They put up a bond or a letter of credit or cashier's check in the amount it would take to finish those sidewalks and street trees in that year. So let's say it was 2018. they're able to, after they put that bond up with the county, they're then able to pull building permits. And that bond is held for a certain period of time to say, you promised to complete these improvements, and we have this bond as a way of promising that it will get done. And if you don't finish it, the county will come in and finish it for you. Right now in our ordinance, we do not have a provision for renewing that at a higher rate. So as you know, from 2018 to 2023, the price of materials has greatly increased. And so now what we have is a situation where projects are renewing. They keep going, they're not being finished, and we do not yet have enough money to finish those projects if they were to walk away. So what we would like to start the process of discussion on is for people or subdivision developers that want to renew, adding in a 10% increase across the board, so that if they come to us and they want to renew their project for another year, which they would have to do if they want to continue, we would have to increase that amount by 10% every year they renew. And that gives us the ability to start to catch up to some of those inflation costs, to actually have a collateral that would be relevant to the cost it would actually take to finish the improvements if they walk away. So with that, I can take some questions now or just jump into the text amendment.
I have a question, I guess, and instead of like, well, not instead of, I guess, you are talking about maybe a 10% fixed increase year by year. I think that's a good approach potentially. My question relates more to, is there like a agency or something that's recognized that looks at inflation costs for construction material that we could maybe identify? And so if it's like a 20% increase on 1 year, we actually recognize more of a national or a state a group or consultant company that actually identifies what construction material inflation looks like year by year versus us just kind of having a 10%. I feel like that would safeguard us even better, following a national trend, if you will, of inflation to construction costs. And if there's a group or something that we could, you know, feel confident to point towards, like kind of like the city does the medium income, or what is the medium area of income or something, the AMI or something. Sorry, I'm not getting that right, but anyways, they use numbers from a national perspective. The area median income, that's what it is.
Yes. So what we referenced in doing the 10% was we spoke with the highway department, and Lisa Ridge, who does a lot of, she helps a lot with their grant funding, is that they look at the NDOT pricing. And so NDOT has told them that they should just assume a factor of 10% per year.
Okay.
And that will capture the inflation from year to year. And that's been occurring for several years. So I think the 10% is what they say at the federal level, to just build that in, assuming that price change. And I think that they were comfortable with that.
Okay,
I see Julie has her hand raised too.
Yeah, income's
addresses
not
my
going to tell,
concern.
income's not going to tell you anything, but Margaret was at the last MPO meeting, as was I, and there was a discussion about the fact that engineers in the industry are lowballing price estimates inadvertently, and what that does is then it sends all of these projects forward with an estimated cost to the MPO, and it turns out that that cost is not accurate, it's way low. So I think the method that Ms. Ridge has proposed is a really good one. It makes a great deal. She knows more than anybody about the cost of construction materials for infrastructure. So I think that's a good plan.
Right, I want to clarify, I wasn't suggesting us looking at income, just the city has something put together where they look at more national numbers. And so with Jackie's kind of expanding on why and how we got to 10%, from kind of an NDOT perspective, really does address kind of what my concern was, is that we're adequately increasing it so we don't, find ourselves behind the 8 ball, I guess.
And I'd just like to ask, I mean, that number of 75 kind of unfinished PUDs to me is a pretty large number, and I'd like to see those mapped out, and like descriptions of the projects and names of the projects, locations of the projects, because as it's just important to me that I also would like to have, as was mentioned in this listening session, I know it's not best for the builder, but I would like to have an expiration date if they haven't begun building certain phases or not making progress toward the completion of the PUD. I think it's important that the county have the ability to renegotiate that after a certain amount of time.
Quick clarification, that was subdivisions, not PUDs, correct?
No, I
Right.
think it's PUDs, well, which one are you referring to? What am I referring
The
to?
73, I think Jackie said there were 73
I
subdivisions
see,
that had outstanding letters of credit or bonds
I
or
see.
whatever, sureties out there, but I think she said subdivision,
I
but not
see.
PUDs.
I
That's all
see.
I was just clarifying.
Okay, thank you.
And
There's-
there may be some overlap,
No,
but
not
that-
at all. I was
yeah.
just determined.
yeah,
I think Margaret is talking about something very important, that we should look at this parallel, because we don't want to be caught, with inadequate funds in a PUD too, because we're not building in fixed increases.
Well, they would be included in that number that Jackie gave. I
That
think.
they would fall within the subdivision
I
category.
think they would, because it'd be
We do have
development
a
plans
lawyer
after
here.
the final plat, so just,
Yes.
okay.
The PUDs are required to follow the same performance bond procedures as the subdivisions.
Okay,
So Jackie, if you could back up just a second, because I'm trying to understand the time frame and the process. So what you're recommending through Lisa, which I think is a good idea to make sure the county's costs are covered. So when someone files for the surety, at the time the final plat has been, let's just say recorded, then how long is that surety valid for? Is it 2 years? Because you've got the surety bond in order to proceed, but then you've also got the surety to make sure that the improvements that were put in are performing properly for a 2-year period. Does that make sense? The question I'm asking?
it does. And I don't want to further confuse the group, but I may. So there's, when you go to final plat, you have to fill out, we make people fill out a subdivision improvement agreement with a performance bond guarantee. Tied to that is the money to finish out the project. The subdivision improvement agreement and the performance bond guarantee timeline has typically been 2 years from the date of final plat approval. So that's what's up on the screen. What we've been seeing though is that so they'll do like a letter of credit, and that's good for 1 year. We have to go to the bank on the day that expires, and we'll see developers in the last minute, literally with minutes to spare, switch and give us a new letter of credit good for another year. And they keep doing that. So that doesn't give us much leeway to actually plan ahead, because they're kind of renewing last minute. So we're hopeful that in working with the highway department to sort of fix some of the old issues and also plan ahead for what we want in the ordinance. The discussion today is based on some of the history we've had to educate ourselves to, fix this process to make it better, but also to acknowledge, what we have in the past. So having a performance bond period of a longer time period would tell us, okay, Bernie has a project, it's a 30-lot subdivision. He's telling us it's going to take 4 years. The estimate today is, let's say $10,000. If it's going to take you 4 years, add 40% increase to that, because that's what it's going to take 10% every year renewal, and that's what we want in the long term. If you're saying it's going to take 4 years, then go ahead and give us the funds for that 4 years up front. Now we
That's
could do
what
it
you-
that way, or you could say every year you renew, it's just that 10%. But then you run the risk of them walking away at the last minute. So.
I like the first scenario you proposed. It's cleaner, it's makes more sense, and that way those increases are captured. And then on section D, the next section, then it makes more sense, because I was concerned that we were going to miss out on, those last 4 years of inflation. So at least this way you're caught up. And then I'm wondering if this could be reworded just for clarity, because I don't know what I don't know if you want to rely on petitioner's engineer to come up with the increase estimate. I think what you outlined was much clearer, just a flat 10. And maybe even we could even put something in there about the highway engineer in consultation with the highway engineer or something, because if there's not a 10% increase, then she can just say, no, we're not gonna, you can go ahead and renew for the same cost. That's only going to benefit the petitioner. So.
Right. Yes, I think that would be cleaner. And I think that after we had a meeting today with the highway department, and I think we will just take out the portion that they have to both update the price estimate to NDOT pricing and add the 10%. According to highway, the 10% will encompass the updated pricing. So I don't think we have to do both, if that makes sense. So we'll just have to automatically renew at the 10% increase.
Right, that makes sense.
And I do want to say that, the ramifications of this text amendment could be that, my understanding from talking with legal is we're allowed to do this the date it goes into effect. So even if we have a subdivision that's been renewing since 2005, we could say, sorry, to renew to 2024, you need to add 10% to that estimate. You've been able to renew at the same rate since 2005. And so those people may say, well, I don't have it, and walk away at that point in time. And then the county is, left with that amount of money. The road may not be taken in, but that's sort of the conundrum that we're faced with right now, is that there are areas of the county that we do not have enough money in collateral. They haven't been completed. And so we're just sort of in this, we're in a hard spot, and we're trying to fix some of the past and also fix the future.
I think we can absorb whatever happens. My question is, if it's 2005, are they going to have to incorporate a 10% per year increase from 2005 to 2024, or just 1 year to 2024?
My understanding, and Dave can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the date this goes into effect, we would only be able to ask for that renewal.
Got it.
For that 1 year.
Got it. Yep. Good. Okay. That's fair then. I was going to say the other way doesn't sound fair. Okay. I think we just go through this hard patch and just get this done and get it done right, so that we're not dragging this out. I just feel like this has been hanging over our heads, planning's heads, highways heads for so long. It just doesn't make sense to keep prolonging this, kind of hoping that they'll get stuff done, because if they don't have the money to pay the bond, they don't have the money to finish the project. And if they had the money to finish the project, I imagine they would have. So I think we're going to end up paying a lot of these, and we might have to go to council for an additional through highway to get this stuff done. But I think we owe it to the residents of those areas and I think we just need to bite the bullet and deal with the pain short term for a long-term gain and clarity.
So two questions. One, so Julie, are you suggesting that Lisa's office generate the estimates?
No, I'm suggesting we use that 10% number she gave us, but that if something changes, she can go ahead and offer advice that
Okay.
says, oh, no, we don't need 10% this year. There wasn't inflation, there was deflation, or whatever it might be. Or, oh, this is a horrible year, we have to add 25% or whatever. So I think we just need to kind of give ourselves, I don't know, Dave, if we can do that legally, but give ourselves an out in section 10 that allows Ms. Ridge to offer an assessment, or the highway engineer or our highway department to offer, you know, if that 10% number isn't right for this year, that they need to let us know as soon as possible, and then we just use that new number for that year.
And that, the reason why I was asking is because that under D, whatever chapter we're under there, or section we're under, it says submitted by the petitioner, the petitioner's engineer, or by the petitioner, however, but the highway department has always been able to, has always approved that number.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
stays the same, I guess, is what I'm asking you.
Yeah, my suggestion is just get rid of the petitioner's input and just set it at 10% unless the highway department tells us otherwise, due to
But there's gotta be,
circumstances.
there's gotta be a base number that is gonna have to be generated for each improvement.
Oh, for the first time, yes. I'm just
Oh,
talking about
okay.
subsequent. Yep, I hear
Okay.
you. I got you now. Yep, we're
Okay.
speaking the same
I'm
language.
just thinking that,
Yep.
that's a pretty, that could be a pretty big job and could
Yep,
take a
Yeah,
lot
no.
of these. I mean, you can go through means, MEANS. And what that does is that, and that's, I'm surprised that the engineer's estimates are that much lower, because when I did it, the engineer's estimate was always higher. Because the last thing you wanted to see was the engineer's estimate being, and it was an honest number, but you know, that's where the contractors can, through the competitive bid process, can find the best pricing.
yeah,
Means was
but-
higher,
well,
but you never wanted a project to come in lower
right,
by,
right.
unless there's a good reason than what the what the bids were coming in, because then you really had a pickle on your hand. You just really had
Yeah.
a issue.
Yeah,
Okay,
no, I hear that, and it is unusual, Bernie. I think that's why they mentioned it at the MPO meeting.
Yeah.
This is happening, so it is unusual. I think it's about the bidding process and how many bids are coming in. And I think part of it too is when we put things out for bid as to the kinds of responses we're getting in terms of competitiveness, what time of year it is. I think that's having an impact as well.
well, I know next year, just speaking with the construction community, just on and off, they're not bidding a lot of projects for next year, so it's kind of
Well,
a sump right now.
yeah, they're not making multifamily, securitizing multifamily homes. That's the problem.
That may be what it is.
That is.
It's just another hash on the axe handle of the multifamily.
No, I mean, it's the banks.
Yeah,
You know, it's banking policy.
okay.
Well, there was a lot brought up during the letter, I guess, talking about oversight of these, project manager, identifying the appropriate place of how we're supposed to look at these and making sure that they're getting done and executed. Were we planning on talking about any of that other kind of, administrative part of this? Or was a lot of that hashed out maybe earlier today with the highway department of who's really going to be overseeing this? Because I thought that was a big part of what was brought up to the plan commission as well.
Yeah, so the follow-up from that discussion at the plan commission is that we met with the highway department and the legal department, and we've sort of gone through our records of which projects have been renewed over time, or which ones have, has the developer already walked away. And then there's been several projects that unfortunately there were things to be completed still in the subdivision. But the prior administration of the highway department took in those roads without those completed items. So I think I kind of want to focus it on two things. One is like the historical records, and the other is like how to move forward, knowing what we know now. And so some of the historical records, I'm happy to report on that to you all. I may need a little bit more time to work with the highway department to get together a plan for how we're going to deal with that. But as far as this discussion, I have generally focused it on what do we want to see moving forward.
Jackie, one other thought, and this would be something certainly to discuss with Lisa, but oftentimes when you put an engineer's estimate together, at the bottom, you'll put in a contingency, a 10% contingency. So that might be a way to kind of categorize some of these potential increases, putting in a contingency item at the bottom of the estimate. And I don't know if that's something that came up or not, but that's a common practice that people would not be surprised to see. And then that way the number is the number, but the letter of credit, this cashier's check, would still be for the amount with all that plus a contingent amount. And that's a very common tool that you put into it as you budget a project to make sure that's added. Maybe that's in the estimates now. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see a spreadsheet of, what the per street tree is costing, what square foot of sidewalk is, what cost per lineal foot of curb, square yards of asphalt. It wouldn't be sewer pipe and stuff like that, because that's typically taken care of. But you see what I'm getting at? And that would still cover a 10% or whatever the number is. And then we would still be covered by the number. I just don't know if those are included or not in those estimates. Because Lisa's right. I mean, the prices are going up. And I think
Bernie, the problem is if it's a 5-year bond, then 10% is only going to cover 1 year of that inflation.
That's a good point, Julie.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
So,
and we're going from 2 years to 5 years.
So when they initially post, let's say that the cost of the improvement is $100. We tell them, well, you have to post $110 because that includes a 10% contingency, Bernie. But if they want to renew a second time, we would say, okay, $110 is now the base cost, and we're going to add 10% contingency on that. So then they're going to have to post $121 because $11 would be that 10% contingency. So
Yes,
I think that in all fairness, we should assume that 110% of that first year is just becoming the cost that second year. Like it's essentially just like absorbed because that's the inflation covered for the rest of that calendar year. Does that seem to make sense?
Yes, it does. It does.
Okay.
I wasn't tracking it in that way.
That works.
Okay. Okay.
I guess I just have one final comment, this revision is as good as the execution. And I think that was some of the discussions that was brought up. And I know you want us to kind of stay focused on this, but it's pretty critical that we understand or identify how we're going to manage this and administrate it, as much as the language. So I'm somewhat, thinking that we should kind of try to spell that out a bit so we don't find ourselves in a situation again where we're basically saying, X has been administrating it, but Y should have been doing it all the time. And we should clarify this moving forward so we don't find ourselves in the same position. I feel like that is problematic for all parties involved, and if we can come to an agreement, we should go ahead and codify that, is that the legal term you would use, into this ordinance. So, again, you know, the words are important, but the execution is just as important.
Yes. What, do you, as members of the planning commission, do you want us to report on some of the historical items that, you know, we're meeting internally about, or what would you like presented to you, or do you just want to look solely at this text amendment?
I just don't want to find ourselves in the same position 5 to 10 years down the road.
Ron,
Where we're asking, you know,
is your question whether this should be maintained by the highway department or the planning department? Is that the question?
yeah, pretty much. That's what I took from kind of the feedback that we got, that, you know, planning should be administrating this and highway's been doing it. And
Okay.
it would be nice to figure out what the most appropriate way to do that and kind of put it in here so we can iron that out. And if that constitute, you know, more hours and another, you know, position, then that's what it does. If planning can't administrate it with the staff that they have, or if highway can't do it with the staff they have. But I just don't want to find myself or anyone in this position 10 years from now, you know, kind of going back and forth of whose responsibility it is. And I think that's as important of a discussion as it is getting the language corrected.
Okay, so I'm fine with adding in who administers this. I think this is something maybe the office manager could maintain a list of. I mean, it just seems like this list should be publicly available. You know, on request, of course. I think it's a matter of having a spreadsheet, and that's it. I don't think this is going to be a whole position at all. I just don't see that, but I know it's more work for planning, and so I worry about that, and Jackie knows what to do here, but I would say that one thing I would like, Jackie, is not, I think Margaret might have a different perspective on trying to get a better sense of which projects are still outstanding. But for me, my concern is developer A doesn't complete the job, leaves us hanging, and you know, even with the 10%, we're hosed, we're paying money, county's investing money in something that should have been done by the developer, etc. And then developer A comes back 2 years later and says, hey, I got this great idea for development. I think the plan commission should know that this developer did not complete a project in the past. I think that's only fair. And I think that should be part of our consideration. When we look at companies, we always look at responsive, responsible bidder. And I think that's the same thing we should be doing with developers. So I would like this information to be utilized as part of a packet when a developer comes with a proposal. I think it's only fair that if they're not completing projects, that we should know about that before they get an approval on a new project. And I just think that's fair. So that's the only thing I would ask for, is that list is something that is utilized and reviewed as petitions are compiled by planning staff on an ongoing basis. Thanks.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
And Dave, yeah, go ahead, Dave.
yeah, and there's a situation coming up where that could be useful information on a developer who has dropped the ball in the past. But the statute on performance bonds was changed in 2021. And so we're gonna have to rewrite our section on that anyway. And it requires that we specify who is responsible for determining that the improvements have been constructed accurately. It requires us to have our performance bond estimate based on an engineer's estimate or an actual contract. So there's things that we're gonna need to add in there, but there are things that are appropriately done by the highway department. For example, the bond amount, the compliance with the construction standards, and there are things that could probably be better handled by planning with the spreadsheet and so forth. And I think there's a lot of things we can do to help out the administration of this process by stating that we can call performance bonds anytime the week before they expire, just to give us more time. And I guess, there's always been the problem, and it's a policy matter or question, that we can do a performance bond. And if they don't finish it within 2 years, we can cash the bond and finish it before that bond amount gets stale. The only problem is you're gonna have a lot of subsequent construction going over those roads that were taken in by the county. And so, you've gotta weigh the benefits and the burdens of that policy to say, hey, we're getting into a heck of a problem because we let these things keep going. Maybe it's better if we just cash the bond, put the roads in, and then, have a maintenance bond, try to get a maintenance bond or something to cover for a couple of years, but there's always gonna be the problem of subsequent construction tearing up our roads.
Yeah, good point, Dave.
Well, the one point you brought up, Dave, is I was thinking through how do we keep planning staff and highway staff from dealing with somebody coming in at the last minute and either reviewing with minutes, renewing with minutes to go, or wondering if they're just gonna walk away from it. And the week in advance or whatever that time period is,
Whatever you want.
is a good idea, just to give the county the ability to say, hey, we're gonna go ahead and a month in advance, I don't care.
Yeah.
We're gonna give you a week. And on the second week, we're gonna go ahead and draw this money, and there's 2 weeks spare, whatever that number is, there's 2 weeks of cushion there. And whether it's 5 years minus 2 weeks or 2 years minus 2 weeks, there is a buffer there. And I'm assuming if it's written in the ordinance, then it's legitimate, and you don't have to wait until the very last stroke of the bell for us to be able to draw on the bond.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea you brought up, because I was wondering the same thing. And
And
I
I
think a
think-
week is short, so cause then everybody's scrambling, right? And that's when mistakes happen.
And I think with the 10% increase, there won't be a disincentive for the county to be, wanting to call it, because we would actually have the right amount of funds to finish the project. So right now, we're like hoping they don't walk away, right? Because we want them to finish the project, because now we're in a situation where it would cost us more to finish the project because we don't have enough. They've been able to renew at a lower rate or the same rate over and over again and not adjust for inflation. And so if we have the 10% increase, we would feel more comfortable being able to call it, because we could know with more assurance that it could get finished to the standards it was supposed to. So. yeah,
What are
good
the
discussion.
unforeseen consequences of this? Let's just, could we vet that a little bit, like,
We price out a developer,
pardon me?
we price out a developer, it's probably a big one. Most likely it would be a local developer too, working on limited funds.
So it could disincentivize certain smaller developers from being able to meet this requirement. As you'll see below, I also am considering the idea, but of course would want more input from the Plan Commission and other developers in the community to just let me know what other ramifications might be. But if we do not accept letters of credit and we only have the cashier's check, that would remove some of the administrative burden of having to be at the bank at the time the letter of credit expires. But knowing that we could do a week in advance, that may give us a little bit more leeway. But the issues in the past have been we maybe didn't get to the bank in time. We've let letters of credit lapse, and so now we're just holding permits on whole subdivisions and saying you can't have a permit until you come back and post a new letter of credit. So it puts us a little bit in a bind. So if we have the cashier's check and it gets cashed immediately, we have that no matter what. We don't have to go to the bank. If someone is sick that week and it gets missed, we don't risk the loss of the entire bond. So that's something that we're considering, but I know the threshold or the bar of posting a letter of credit is lower than a cashier's check, which is the actual full amount in cash that they would have to post. So that would be another, it would be a little bit more difficult. So I think this has been a helpful discussion, and Dave brought up some good points, which is we still need to add in here more detail about the state code changes. Would the ORC like to see another version of this? I think it would be best if we did do another version of this at the ORC. And then in the meantime, we also hope to, report back a little bit more about what we've been working with the highway department on in terms of older bonds and just how we're going to move forward with some of those.
I would
That sound like
recommend
enough?
bringing it back. I think we've got a good group here, and I've seen us trying to piecemeal some language at our regular meeting. So I think if you kind of are still in the works of perfecting this, I shouldn't use perfecting, but writing this, definitely bring it back, I think is a great option.
Okay.
Good work, Phil. Good work, good job.
To start, yes, this is something that we really want to get right moving forward. So hopefully we can continue working with the highway department. I think just collaborating and seeing what we could do better is just one of the ways that we can move forward. So
Not to beat the dead horse, but the way I see this is, one, we're trying to get better numbers, better dollar values based on what the expectations are. And two, we're trying to make this so we don't daylight on these, on the surety or the performance dollars. I don't use the term bond, but the performance. So we're not scrambling at the last minute, or we run the risk of losing a few days and all of a sudden it's expired and everybody just kind of has their hands on it. I mean, those are the two key points that I see that we're trying to accommodate. Am I correct?
that is correct. And I think with the state code changes as well, you'll see that the state has made it basically so that we have to release permits once a bond is posted. So we don't want to be in a situation where we have no carrots left and that people are then living in subdivisions where improvements haven't been completed, and then the county is left with the decision of, okay, the developer walked away, there's still these improvements left. Do we have to foot the bill? And where does that money come from? We don't want that situation. And so we hope to get ahead of it with some of these changes and amendments.
And I think there's that third point I brought up, is how to administrate this so we all clearly understand the responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the state law, I've said this probably before to you, but we went to a seminar not too long ago, and the lobbyist at the seminar was saying, used to be that legislatures were farmers and attorneys, and now they're insurance salesmen and developers. And the law has really changed, and this performance bond statutory changes really reflects that. So we cannot withhold permits based on the failure to put in improvements if there's a bond out there. So that makes it really important to stay on top of it. But it also brings up another point, where we can't withhold permits and occupancy permits based on the improvements, that if we could tie it to something else, and I'm thinking of the Southern Meadows situation of, the plot plans and the topography and the grading elevations and so forth. Because, if they don't meet their grading plan and so forth, that's not technically a public improvement, and we could withhold permits based on that. And why that's important in the context of improvements is because, like, out towards what Mayfield's development out there by Union Valley Road, the grades are such that we cannot, and the sidewalks are at an angle. They're tilted, so you can't meet ADA standards on that without taking out all the sidewalks, regrading all the driveways and so forth. So if we can ensure that those things are taken care of, it will make doing the improvements a lot less expensive. And make it actually fit within the bond, because if your bond is based on a grading plan that allows for flat sidewalks, and then you don't do that grading, then your bond is worthless. I mean, it's gonna cost twice as much. So it's a lot of moving parts, and we're just gonna have to think about it as we go through that and stay
Just
on
curious,
top.
are the slopes longitudinally the way the sidewalk runs parallel to the street, or are they?
Here's the long part of the sidewalk. you know,
Okay, so
tilted
the
like
slope
this.
this way,
Yeah.
either towards the curb or towards the lot.
Yeah,
That 2%'s not bad, it's either too much or,
yeah, they're like this, and
Huh.
the driveways are way
Gotcha.
too steep.
just curious, just
Yeah.
curious.
Boy, what a mess.
Okay, so we will bring this back to the ORC with those edits with the state code changes as well. I'd like to move on to the next item, which is the survey feedback map, and then also just the recommendations from the listening session. What we have is, so we have the survey feedback map on the CDO website. As you know, this is the color coding where it's whether people are strongly satisfied to strongly dissatisfied. We receive more from the listening sessions. We're hoping to just have that all in one location on a map like this. And we just need to, at this point, ask the Plan Commission, put it together and say, you know, these are the ones that have been filled out. Here's what the person would like it to be recommended as. Here's what the staff recommends. What would you like? And if the ORC could kind of give us that final feedback of, you know, I think, you know, stick with staff's recommendation. Okay, next. And then the next one is, okay, that one's a good point. You know, let's take it to the Plan Commission for further review. And the Plan Commission says, go ahead and change the map. That's the kind of feedback that we're hoping to have, so that when we get to the public hearing stage and someone comes forward and says, hey, I filled out a feedback survey to change the zoning and you didn't change it. Why didn't you change it? You can say, well, you could listen here to this meeting. We had a discussion about it. You had some chances to come to a listening session, but you're also welcome to talk at the public hearing. But you could, we could start at a point of, we've already kind of looked at this and discussed it. And so that we could get ahead of some of the comments and things at the time of the public hearing. Does that make sense? To kind of give all of these a response and to say yes or no to the people that have filled this out. That would be staff's recommendation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really good plan. I would like for, when that's all done, I would like for this map to be available online, so that if you hover your cursor over one of the dots, a box opens up and says, this is the comment, this is staff's recommendation, ORC says, Plan Commission says, whatever gets added to that record. I think that would be the most transparent way to do this, is to provide that information.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
I agree with
Yeah.
Julie's comment, but I also am just generally curious of, where we see some of these strongly dissatisfied. And maybe there's a lot of satisfied, right? Or, well, it's hard to discern, but. I'm really curious how they're related to that area, like geographically in the county. Is this someone that's strongly satisfied that lives there? Or is it someone that's strongly satisfied that's part of, like, let's say, the business community, and they're seeing a zone where we're adding commercial use? And I think that is very helpful. I'm really curious how these relate to the people that live in that area too. I don't know if that was a question we asked or not, but and maybe it's not something we need to share publicly as far as addresses of who commented or whatnot, but it means a lot more to me knowing that you live in that area and if you're satisfied or dissatisfied versus maybe a potential developer coming in and looking at that area and how it meets their needs. So I hope I'm conveying my question or kind of my desire of feedback clearly enough.
So each one of these dots has an address, correct?
yes,
So then if we have a comment from somebody that, do the people who have a comment, do they list their addresses? Necessarily? So we can
So-
look and, go ahead, excuse me.
I was just gonna say, we did bring this to you. Can you see my screen with the
Mhm.
Victor Pike? Okay, so we did bring this idea to you before we had the listening sessions, and remember we had, sort of this table where it was owner filling out the request, what's the score, what's the comp plan, use, acreage. So we could employ something like this, and then at the end you would make your recommendation. We would like to put that back on the feedback map to say, hey, we talked about this at November 11th ORC meeting. Here's the link to the recording. It was decided that it would stay low density residential, or something like that, so that we could have that documented. The person could go back to the map and look at the meeting recording, listen to that discussion. And also it's helpful for staff to say, oh, I can go back to that meeting and understand why that discussion was being made, or what have you, why that rezone wasn't recommended to move forward. So
I know I raised privacy concerns at the time. And
Yeah.
so it's because of me that it's not interactive like that, because but I deferred to the group, but I still maintain that, if I look at who that jerk is on Rogers Street who gave an unsatisfactory comment or something like that, it might, not that it would influence me, but it has the chance to do that. And I don't know what other people think about that, but I know that has to be said. So, just so that we can deliberate with that issue on the table. And I defer to the group.
Yeah, I see your point, Margaret. I think my concern is a little bit different too. I would like it so that it's not a chart you have to open and then correlate with an address. I would like it to pop up on the menu as a box, as an inset box whenever you hover over the point. And if you want to leave the question of whether it's the owner of the property or not who has made the statement, I think you could leave that off, but it could be part of an internal record to help maintain privacy. The other thing is, honestly, even the ones who are satisfied, I think we want to have those in a box as well, because we may end up going back to that particular area and thinking we want to change zoning from what's been proposed on the map. And if we were to do that, we need the people who say, I like this zoning proposed, to still have a voice in the process, just because they're going to be saying, I like this instead. So I think it'll be really helpful for us to have that in there as well, not just the neutral or dissatisfied.
Yes, that makes sense. So first round would go, what we're thinking is first round would go to the ORC. We would present it to you, sort of like this matrix, but this wasn't what we would put online, but this is just a helpful tool for you all to evaluate really quickly. Okay, this is the address, this is the proposed zone, current zone, acreage. We could give you this type of information. And then I think the choices for the ORC would be, keep it the same, recommend a change to an X zone, or take this to the Plan Commission for further discussion.
I think it's a good plan.
Okay.
I think it's great. Also,
Okay.
just quickly, I think if you put like object ID on there and then potentially correlate that with the responses, so we could actually see how one response relates to the plan on the map. Or something, there has to be probably an easy way to distinguish that, because I'm looking at the sample road area and I see a lot of strongly dissatisfied, but really, what are they strongly dissatisfied about? The current zoning, the proposed zoning, and I'm sure there's a comment there that can help clarify what they're strongly dissatisfied about, and to relate that to the points on the map would be great. And I think if you just use like an object number or something, that would help correlate that data.
Right, okay, yes. Sometimes the comments are not brief, but we'll figure out a way. I understand what you're saying now, what their actual request or comment is. Yes, okay.
As we're working towards Julie's comment of being able just to click on the point, but yeah,
Yes.
I think we can incorporate that.
Yes, we want to be concise, but we don't want you to miss something. That makes sense. Okay. We can
Could
do
you
that.
click back to the table, Jackie?
Yes.
The table.
Me too. That's what I'm thinking, if we have two ways of looking at it.
Yeah.
And this is something that, staff could put together with relative ease. What we're trying to balance is we don't want to treat these each like a formal rezone, because that would be a lot of work for staff, and that we wouldn't be able to do a justice for each one of these. So we just want to bring these to you in sort of a concise format that you can also have enough information to make a decision. Of course, some of these are going to be larger parcels that are going to take bigger, or maybe Plan Commission discussion on, but some of these you may be able to answer relatively quickly, or they may be something that we can discuss as a group at ORC.
As a part of that electronic packet, could you include the definitions for each one of the proposed zones? And then the definitions for each one of the comp plan uses with that, so we would have them all available together to be able to read the definition when we see the zone, the proposed zone.
Would it be amenable to have them maybe hyperlinked, or do you want them like in the table?
Hyperlink would be fine, because if I decide I
Okay.
want to, no, not in the table, not in the table
Oh,
at
okay.
all. I mean, hyperlink would
Elsewhere,
be good.
okay.
And then if I need to print something out, then I can click the hyperlink and print it out. I was just trying to think of a concise packet where the definitions were available right there. But
Okay,
that would be fine. Hyperlink would be fine. I'm not trying to generate work for you guys, but that way we know we're coming off the current definitions of what the proposed zone is gonna be, so we can look at it and say, okay, it's medium density, blah, blah, blah. This is what the definition of that zone is, so we know what we're looking at instead of just assuming it when we see it.
Yes.
One final, I guess, comment is that it looks like someone in the city is strongly dissatisfied. So I guess their comment probably brings a lot of context to what they're strongly dissatisfied about, but I'm just generally curious at this point, and maybe we just have some general statements that, a number of X people are strongly satisfied or dissatisfied. I don't know if you really want to have the points in the city. Anyways, I'll get off my map soapbox.
That looks like Ken Nunn's office, doesn't it?
Who really knows? But all I know is they're strongly dissatisfied.
Oh, did someone fill it out for in the city?
A couple of them. But
Okay,
they might be just giving their address where they live, but they own property in the county and they might just be strongly dissatisfied with the whole proposed zoning map. That's where the comment is very crucial to understand. So,
okay. Okay, all right, so that sounds good for staff, and I think as a, I don't know, Tammy, did you want to add anything about how we want to summarize or work from the CDO listening sessions? Did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
No, I don't think I have anything at the moment.
Okay, yes, so it was a lot of additional information that we received that we want to try and coordinate and come back to you all on and keep it moving forward, so.
I guess I have a question for you, Jackie. Was it worth your time and effort and the planning departments to put on the 4 sessions, or did we just not have the best attendance? I know we had some attendance, but from the time and effort you put into it, do you think the payback was there? I guess. Sorry to ask the tough question, but I'm really curious.
I think that it's always a good idea to offer an opportunity for the public to come speak. The last session was the most successful session, and unfortunately the smallest room. I would like to suggest, and this is obviously up to the plan commission as a whole to recommend to staff, but I would like to suggest that we wait for any more public engagement until we get to the hearings, because it just delays the work that we're able to put into the actual CDO in terms of like going to different places and trying to set up for listening sessions. It took quite a bit of time just to even get the technical, hybrid meeting process going, and supplies, printing, and coordinating with the owners of the building or property managers. So it was a lot of extra time that if I was saying what would be the best use of our time this point forward, it would be staff spending more time on the CDO, which I really commend our staff. We're spending 3 hours every single week, twice a week, total 3 hours, looking at the CDO together and having discussions, making edits to it, making sure that it's the best possible document to move forward with. So I think we've got a really good team, and I want to use them efficiently. And to do that, I think, is to just move forward with the best iteration that we can of this CDO and move it towards the public hearing phase.
Perfect. Great feedback. Thank you.
Congratulations on the successful 4 listening sessions, although attendance wasn't what you wanted it to be. The public is kind of burned out, and it's not your fault. So
And this is a hard topic. It's not an easy topic.
Yeah.
That so I know we have a lot to do on terms of education.
That's for sure. Thank you.
All right. Does anyone else have anything that they wanted to go over for tonight's meeting? No? Okay. All right. Well, I will go ahead and stop the recording. So thank you all for attending. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all.